Hey, I'm Joss. I'm a social worker in New Brunswick, and I'm making videos on addiction and mental health. Once an addict, always an addict. Have you heard it before? What do you think about it? I'll try to give my perspective from, point of view of a social worker, somebody that works day in and day out with addiction and mental health clients. So I think the reason why it's so common and we hear it everywhere is because it kind of is ingrained in the model of the AA, where they really try to drill in that concept of like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, and then we kind of translate it to the addict part. Does kind of sound better that way. It's more applicable too, right? Because you think of alcoholic, obviously it's an alcohol dependent person, but if you're looking more at addiction, it's in a sense more inclusive. It includes people with food addiction, shopping addiction, and so on. So is it true or is it not true? I think it's easy to make arguments on both sides. Even if we know that personality does change over time, it tends to remain mostly stable, right? People don't change and aren't one way one day and then completely different the next day. So a lot of the parts of our personality remains the same. If you think of the personality traits that would make somebody more likely to develop an addiction, those traits, they are not changing overnight, right? So which one are they? They are a high openness and experience. That just makes somebody more likely to want to try a new experience. It makes somebody more likely to say yes to the first, like, hey, do you want to do some drugs? But so they're more adventurous and they're more willing to take some risk. If you think of a second personality trait that would make an impact would be to be low in conscientiousness. So that would be more like the not too worried about tomorrow, kind of more the in the moment persons, uh, the people that are they're going to deal with the consequences of their action. That's kind of their mindset. So they are not the ones that are overly worried about the future in that sense, although they can be worried of the future with the next personality trait that I'm going to introduce, which is somebody that's highly neurotic. Being highly neurotic means that somebody is just very sensitive or capable of experiencing the most negative emotion. So we're thinking here about like, their likelihood of feeling depression, the severity of the anxiety that they feel. So not everybody feels anxiety the same way. If you are feeling more the negative emotions, it doesn't mean that you're gonna go and reach out for 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 comfort in substances, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to do that either. Another thing to consider about why it might be true that once an addict, always an addict is that it's kind of like riding a bike. Even if you haven't done it in a while, doesn't mean that you forgot how it's done. And what we see is in treatment often is that people that they take a break from their substance of choice, if they take a break from their addiction, you see that when they get back into it, if they played around with alcohol for like 10 years before it got into a problem, and then they have like a giant alcohol problem for 5 years, and then they stop for a month. When they start again, it's not going to take 10 years like the first time around to develop into a big significant problem. Usually it kind of goes on quick, like almost like you don't forget. And so it makes sense that those AA guys, they're kind of pushing the message that you're once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic, because even if you have clean time in, doesn't mean that it's going to translate into uh, protection for you for falling the next time. So having a lot of time in doesn't mean that you're more resistant the next time that you introduce alcohol back into your life. And AA is kind of more of an old school philosophy. They're not afraid to bring a little touch of fear into what it is, the message that they're preaching. So that said, it's kind of a warning what they're trying to tell you with this. So on the side that it's false, if we don't believe that it's true, if we're making an argument to say that it's not true that once an addict, always an addict, we can't look over the fact that a lot of people have had significant periods of their life where they struggle very much with their substance use, whether it be with alcohol, drug, or other stuff, right? So they struggle a big part of their life, and then they don't anymore. Like they recover, like they beat it. Good for them, right? And who would I be to go talk to somebody that like hasn't really thought that much about alcohol or crystal meth in some time, and Next thing you know, I go and I tell them like you were an addict before, so you're an addict now, right? It wouldn't be my place, and I wouldn't feel that way. I don't think that it's true. And for some people, like latching onto that identity, it really helps them like sink in that message that like, I have the predisposition, and if I bring this substance into my life, it's much more dangerous. I'm not like everybody else, right? That's a hard pill to swallow. So again, I think is an addict always an addict? It depends a lot on the situation, but I heard that from AA guys. They said, once a pickle, never a cucumber. And that pretty much, the question you ask yourself is if I take a cucumber and I stick it in a jar with some vinegar, right? It's not a pickle yet, but how long until it is, right? Is it within the first hour, within the first ten minutes, within the first 5 days? Like, who knows? But one thing's for sure, once my cucumber turned into a pickle, like there's not much I can do to turn it back. And I think our brain is kind of that way, right? If we bathe our brain in substances and chemicals, it's kind of like it's pickling the whole thing. And sure, you can take it out of the vinegar for some time, but it doesn't mean that it's going to get back to the way it was. So I think that there's very much like a duration and severity to that, like recipe of how true is it. So I think it's fair to say that once an addict, always an addict doesn't apply to everybody out there. Some people will make some very remarkable recovery from their addiction. It happens all the time, and it happens actually in most cases. Like we tend to forget that a lot of people recover from addiction because they're not who we think about when we think about addiction. We picture the worst cases. And it's normal. It's the exceptions that stand out. But there is a point to be made about the fact that, you know, spending too much time under the influence of a substance, it certainly does have a biological effect on who we are, and it changes us. It kind of rewires us for the next time. That rewiring of us, it truly impacts the way our body's going to react with the substance. And let's not forget that a lot of the personality traits that we have that made us susceptible to develop an addiction in the first place, but we still have a lot of those traits in us. And so, it's safe to assume that if we go back the same road, the same thing's going to happen to us, and we will be more vulnerable. So, is it true? Is it not true? I mean, it truly depends. It's hard to make a hard conclusion. I see the reason for the catchphrase to exist. First of all, it is catchy. Let's not deny that. But there is a grain of truth to it, um, even if it doesn't tell the whole story. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. Go in the comment. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time.